everyone, so in this video I'm going to be talking about the 5 worst S classes to date in the game. And of course these will only be my opinion, and I'm actually going to try and make a little series of this. I've divided all 41 S class toons that are currently in the game. I've divided them into 8 tiers of toons. So there's about 5 toons in each category, just to kind of break it down a little easier. And I'm basically just going to go through each of the 5 or 6 toons in each tier. And you guys feel free to let me know what you guys think of my tiering. Of course, everyone's going to have their own opinions. So if you do comment in the comment section below, please respect other people's opinions. We're just trying to have a discussion here. So anyway guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more content and information. And here we go. So as part of the 5 worst S-Class toons to date in the game, the first one I want to name off in tier 8 is Kapoor. Kapoor really does emphasize the word poor in his name. He is extremely underwhelming as a toon. The best part about him is the 80% defense buff that he gives all teammates if he's able to rush. But considering he's a 76 AP toon, this is actually pretty difficult to do. He is purely a defensive toon, and at that, he's not exactly a great one in the current meta, where blue toons run Rampage, pun intended, and Infection completely bypasses his specialist skill. And with Kapoor's rush doing 1500 maim damage to a line of enemies, it's almost comical, considering a lot of S-Class toons, on defensive teams at least, have around 10,000 HP sometimes in war, so 1500 is just a laugh really. I just don't find he does enough. Like, even his active skill has a 3-turn initial cooldown, and if he's used on a defensive team, people are rushing on turn 2 or turn 3 before he's able to use this. You can also control him really easily by the 3rd turn with taunt, confuse, stun, or he's just dead. He doesn't have a bound weapon, which does help, meaning you could give him like a focused stun weapon, but I just think that would be a waste on a toon like Kapoor. Kapoor really is not a good toon in the S-Class era. He was okay at the very start when we only had about 5 S-Class toons, but now with 41, he is long past his expiration date. The next toon on my list in tier 8 is Merlin and Rosie. And yes, I've shown video on Merlin and Rosie and how to best utilize him, but he's just not very viable in most areas of the game, at least in my opinion. With a 66 AP rush, that's pretty decent, but he only deals 300% damage to a single enemy. He also recovers from all penalties, which isn't bad, and he regains 50% of his max HP. In all honesty, this type of rush seems more like a defensive rush than an offensive one. Yet when we take a look at his stats, his attack stat is his highest stat. His specialist skill, it's not very good. Once upon a time, I think it was a pretty good specialist skill, but at this point, the way it interacts in the game just isn't enough to make him a viable toon. Lightning reflexes will only trigger if he's the primary target on an adrenaline rush, meaning if he's in line with another toon and a Rov targets and rushes the second toon, even though Merlin and Rosie is technically part of that targeting, they will not perform lightning reflexes. If you get a toon like Priya or Henyon or any of the disarming toons, so even Alpha, and say they rush a different toon on the defensive team and they kill that toon, we'll say it's a Rov, and they still have 2 attacks left, if they hit Merlin and Rosie, even though that toon is targeted, lightning reflexes will still not be triggered. I think what's even worse is that Merlin and Rosie's weapon effect, or any toon's weapon effect who has lightning reflexes, it won't trigger the weapon. Meaning, if my Merlin and Rosie has double attack or stun on attack, they won't be able to perform a secondary attack, they won't be able to stun the enemy on that lightning reflex attack, so it's just one basic attack. And don't get me wrong, you can still use Merlin and Rosie in different areas of a game. I just don't think this character is the most effective, say, in war and raids, for example. In Onslaught, you can use him in some very clever teams, but he's not someone that I would actively pick as a first-line roster toon or second-line roster toon. He's in none of my normal attack teams or defense teams. I could maybe use him on survival road because his weapon lets me have a chance at a second attack. He does have a pretty good active skill. It's a turn 2 active skill, and he gains 150% attack for 2 turns as well as 35% AP. Now this plus 150% attack works really well in Onslaught because you're boosting his attack to such a high amount, and because you're using basic attacks because you don't want to rush, you don't have to level Merlin and Rosie's rush. You don't have to invest the Liliths or the Aidens, but I would say the Ulysses go to good use on Merlin and Rosie. He's just a potent character in Onslaught because of his active skill, and then when we look at his weapon, which, remember, it doesn't work with lightning reflexes. The second attack also doesn't work on his rush, but for basic attacks and with the primary objective in Onslaught to beat the enemy without rushing, he makes to be a very solid character. All you really need to do is boost his attack stat up more, and he is a killing machine in some cases against fast Toons, so yellow Toons that are used on defense. If they did end up updating lightning reflexes so that it worked, even if he was not the primary target but he was still targeted in a line, or if a weapon worked on lightning reflexes, Merlin and Rosie would definitely be a better character than what they are. The next Toon that's on my bottom tier level of S-Class is Malcolm. Now, I kind of hate that Malcolm is in this position because he's a Survivors Club Toon that requires comic books to obtain and comic books to level up, meaning he's a very expensive character. So you have this really expensive character who has an okay leadership skill. I remember when Malcolm first came out, a lot of people thought he would have a plus 50% attack buff and a huge bonus to AP when attacking and be kind of on par with Priya. Instead, we get this melee lead that does 40% attack and a huge bonus to AP when attacking. And I'm pretty sure this got upgraded from 30% attack, to be honest. So when this Toon came out, he was so underwhelming, and still to this day, he is still underwhelming because there are better melee lead Toons that are S-Class. Ivanova's an example, Clementine's an example, just Malcolm is so expensive, and then Ivanova was a free-to-play Toon in the season store that any person could grind out the season tokens to get. Even on Malcolm's rush, it's a bit underwhelming. 76 AP deals 400% damage to a line of enemies, then those enemies get disarmed and dazed for 2 turns. If the AP was lower, it would be better. If the Toon did more damage, it would also be better. If it taunted the enemy into Malcolm, it would be a better rush. Because right now, just dazing and disarming them, okay, so their weapons are broken and they can't use their active skills, but they're still able to rush. It's also only doing it to a line of enemies, so that's 1 to 2 characters. It just doesn't seem like it's doing enough in the S-Class era. Next, when we take a look at Malcolm's active skill, I think this was also updated, and I'm sorry if I got it confused where his leadership skill might not have been changed, but his active skill was, or maybe it was a different character, but the point is I just don't think his active skill is useful enough. Firstly, it's a turn 3 active skill, which makes it quite slow, and then it only recovers Normalize from one other character, which I'm glad it's not recover Normalize to self, considering he's a leader Toon and he doesn't have a specialized skill, so then it would be truly worthless. But considering we have the gentleman who normalizes to 1, so Malcolm would be good to use against him, but you aren't seeing many gentlemen on defense, and Malcolm is an offensive Toon. Princess normalizes 3 characters, so Malcolm is successfully recovering that from 33%, but it's also on turn 3, which is a little late since Princess uses it on turn 2. And then we have AJ, who normalizes a line, but again, Malcolm at turn 3, it's just not fast enough. The rest of his active skill, up to 2 teammates gain 20% AP. 20% is such a low number. On a 76 AP Toon, this is 16 AP, and then on a 66 AP Toon, 20% is 14 AP. It's like holding that 20% AP weapon to self, but by turn 3, are you really going to need that extra 20% to top off your AP? No, you're probably rushing on the second turn, maybe the third turn. So even though he doesn't have a bound weapon, I don't think Malcolm is a good toon. The next toon on the worst toons that I think exist in the game for S-Class is Tiffani. Tiffani first came out, and I think Scopely's objective with Tiffani was to create an anti-Mercer toon. So a toon that people would run on attack or on defense to counter Mercer. But I think they really missed the mark on this one. Her specialist skill, Vitality, is somewhat useful at the moment because of all the infection that's running about, but her rush, it just doesn't do enough for me. 76 AP, 450% damage to a line of enemies. Those enemies get taunt for 3 turns, and then this character gets 30% defense for 3 turns. Great, so you're taunting toons into you for 3 turns, and you're gaining some defense, but with the number of people running focus on attack because of all the taunting toons on defense, and the people using attack up when taunted and focus, all this rush is really doing is giving a huge attack boost to the attackers. And really, there are so many options for people to run focus on attack. Even 2 of the most recent free-to-play toons, we look at Ivanova and we look at Aaron, they both have focus on their active skill for the second turn. So now you're running this toon on defense, and you're kind of helping the attacker out. As I mentioned before, I think Scopely meant for Tiffani to be a counter to Mercer because of her active skill. It's a turn 1 active skill, and up to 2 teammates get elusive for 2 turns, and up to 3 teammates recover from stun. This would be great if you knew Tiffani wasn't going to be stunned on the first turn, but she has just as good of a chance of being stunned as any other toon. So even if you had mods, like a huge 75% resist mod on Tiffani for stun, she still has the chance of being stunned, and then it's kind of like a wasted slot. Great, she's giving elusive to toons, which means they won't be giving away AP, and she's recovering from stun, meaning your toons can actually attack, but this is very dependent on her not being stunned, and there is no way to guarantee this. So I think this toon just needed something else added to her. I think she could have been a decent anti-Mercer toon if her bound weapon wasn't absolute defense, but instead if she had a weapon like Jackie's weapon, a 75% chance to resist stun as well as confuse. Then Tiffani would be a viable toon to use. But as of now, I just don't think she does enough. I know that some people do run her on some defensive teams, and they run her well. But it's very difficult to make her very, I would say, useful under consistent setups. And the last toon that has made my bottom tier list is Eugene. Eugene just doesn't really have anything going for him. He is an indomitable toon, so whenever he's not stunned, every time he takes damage, whether it's something like a burn damage, bleed damage, attack, which is a basic attack, or a rush, he gets 30% extra defense till the start of the next turn, and this defensive ability can stack. He has a 58 AP rush, which is quite fast. He deals 400% damage to 1 enemy, and up to 5 enemies get impair for 1 turn, and then he gains plus 75% defense for 3 turns. If he had an added taunt on him, and I know I just spoke about taunt not being a very wise choice to use, but it had more to do with Tiffani having a 76 AP rush versus Eugene having 58 AP, it would be very easy to trigger this toon on a defensive team on the first turn, meaning the enemy would be impaired on their second turn when most toons or some toons might be ready to rush. Also getting that 75% defense buff, it could stack with his Indomitable, again, if he had taunt. But without taunt, he's kind of just a toon that's similar to Kapoor, in my opinion. Looking at Eugene's active skill, it's a turn 3 active skill, so I already want to write it off. Turn 3 is just so late with active skills in the S-Class era that it's almost just unusable unless you're in survival road. So all teammates recover from debilitating effects and get elusive for 1 turn. The elusive is nice because it means no natural AP gain, but on turn 3 using that, like the enemy already has all the AP that they need. They probably already rushed on you once or twice, to be perfectly honest. And recovering from debilitating effects, now the definition of debilitating effects, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what all falls underneath that category, but it's not as all-encompassing as all penalties, for example. This character in total just has a weird kit where no one is forced to attack this toon, yet he's set up to be a very defensive toon. He also doesn't have a bound weapon, which means you could give him something like an absolute defense weapon, but I just could never see myself using Eugene on an attack, a defense team, onslaught, raids, survival road, hordes, you name it. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching and listening to my video. Let me know in the comment section below if you agree or disagree with my bottom 5 S-Class toons.